Okay, this is not ESPN's 30 for 30, but it's my 98 in 98. 98 seasons in the history of the New York Football Giants in 98 days. I don't think I'm going to get it quite done in 98 days, but I'm trying to get it done before the beginning of the regular season, which starts, early, middle September. And I should be able to get done all 98 seasons. Just a brief recap, of all the 98 seasons in the history of the New York Football Giants. And we're forging ahead here at the 1943 season, which happened to be the 19th season in the history of the New York Football Giants. Now, the Giants started in 25. NFL started in 1920, obviously. So the 19th season for the New York Giants. It's also the 24th season in the history of the NFL. It's a good season for the Giants. Exciting season. Obviously, once again, it didn't bring home all the marbles, but there was, they made it exciting at the end. They really didn't start off too well. But toward the end of the season, they really started turning things around, and they didn't get to the championship game, but they got to a playoff game, which was kind of rare. As they wound up tied at the end of the season with the Washington Redskins to see who went to the championship game. But so let's start off here. We got the 1943 NFL draft, and due to, I believe it was because the rosters, because we're talking, we're dead in the middle of World War II. The United States joined World War II in 1941. The war ended in midway through. It was like July or August of 45. So, but we're 1943. We're dead in the middle of World War II. So a lot of the rosters were really depleted. And so depleted. How depleted were they? They were so depleted that there was only 8 teams in existence. There's been 10. It's got 2 divisions, 5 in the Eastern, 5 in the Western. But there was only, it went down to 8. The Cleveland Rams were for one season. They didn't fold, but it's in the description. They were able to not open up shop this season, shall we say, because of the depleted rosters. Just what it was. And the Philadelphia Eagles and the Pittsburgh Steelers had to combine, and they became the Steagles for one season. 1944, the Philadelphia Eagles resumed operations, and they were once again the Philadelphia Eagles. But in 1944, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Chicago Cardinals merged just because of the rosters were just so depleted. A lot of the talent, had left and gone overseas to do what they had to do to fight this country. But also in the draft, I mean, the past few years there was like 22 rounds. Each team wound up with 20 picks, so there wound up was 20. There was 200 guys selected in the draft. Well, this season there was 32 rounds because of the depleted roster. So I guess they tried to, so each team basically wound up with 30 picks. I'll go over in a minute how you get 30 picks in 32 rounds. I'll go over that in a minute. But basically because of the depleted rosters, I mean, they just try to get each team just try to get as many guys as they could. Although I'm sure the way the drafting system was back then, I mean, you're drafting in the 28th, 29th round, 30th round. I mean, you're picking like the bottom of the barrel. I mean, probably a lot of these guys never sniffed the football field, an NFL football field, but it is what it is. So the 1943 NFL draft was held in Chicago. It was held on April 8th, 1943 at the Palmer House Hotel in Chicago. With the first overall pick, the Detroit Lions selected halfback Frank Sinkwich. This is also it was not a particularly good draft. I mean, if you go, I think back, I remember going back to like say 1940. Over the past like 3 or 4 drafts, there was only a handful of Hall of Famers, and in particular, there was no more than like 2. I think there was maybe 5 altogether. There was no Hall of Famers in this draft. 300 players were selected, and not one of them went to the Hall of Fame. So this draft is the first NFL draft with not to produce a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I said like 42. I think there was 2. 41, there might have been one guy. 1940, I think there was 2 guys or something like that. So there's not a boatload of Hall of Famers coming out. As I said, it had a lot to do quite possibly because of the war. But in the first round, the New York Giants took Steve Filipowicz, a fullback from Fordham, who had a nice career with the Giants. So that was a good pick there. The thing is what they tried to do to get parity, all right, in the league is what they try to do today. They want parity. In round 2, the 5 teams with the worst record from the year before were the only ones to select in round 2. So round 2 was picks 11 through 15. Then they resumed round 3 with pick 16. So by pick number 16, the Detroit Lions had selected their 3rd player. The Giants had only picked one guy so far. In the 3rd round, the Giants picked their 2nd player was Dewey Proctor, a back from Furman. Powerhouse Furman. Round 4, same thing. The 5 worst teams from the year before were the only 5 to pick in round 4. So by the time round 5 rolled around, when pick 31 rolled around, the Detroit Lions had selected their 5th player in the 1943 NFL draft. The Giants by that time had only selected 2. And even when the round was over, the Giants selected Val Colwell, a guard from Oregon. So after round 5, the Giants had only picked 3 guys. And then once again, they go to round 6. The Detroit Lions selected first. They took Jim Jones, a back from Union of Tennessee. So they had taken 6 guys already. The Giants still only taken 3. I'll just round out the top 10 round. That's all for the Giants. The Giants took Jim Reynolds, a back from Auburn, out of round 6. Round 7, the Giants took Lou Palazzi, a center from Penn State. Round 8, the Giants took Larry Visnick, a guard from Benedictine. Round 9, the Giants took Doyle Caraway, a guard from Texas Tech. And round 10, the Giants took Bill Piccolo. Interesting. A center, another center. I guess you can never have too many centers, I guess, back then. But interestingly enough, like when you get down toward the end of the draft, okay, rounds 31 and 32, the teams with the 5 best records from the year before were the only teams to pick. Now, I mean, the Giants picked player number 291, which was Verlin Adams, a guard from Morris Harvey. Pick number 296, the Giants took Bob Brundage, a back from Penn. I mean, these guys probably never sniffed the football field. But, I mean, that was basically the way it was. Oh, actually, Verlin Adams, oddly enough, he actually played 3 years for the Giants. Go figure. He was a tackle. He wore number 28. Interesting. But, a lot of these guys, probably had no significance at all, But so basically each team selected 30 players. The Washington Redskins had Mr. Irrelevant Bob Bogovich, a guard from Delaware. That was Mr. Irrelevant. But, I mean, there was no Hall of Famers selected at all. So 1943 NFL season was an interesting season. It was the 24th regular season in the National Football League. Due to the exodus of the players who left to serve in World War II, the Cleveland Rams were granted permission to suspend operations for the seasons, while the Philadelphia Eagles and the Pittsburgh Steelers merged for this one season, with the combined team known as either Philadelphia-Pittsburgh or they were called the Steagles by fans. They played 4 home games in Philly and 2 in Pittsburgh, with only 8 teams playing the 1943 season, tied the 1932 season for the fewest teams in league history. So that basically 1943 and 32 they only had 8 teams in the league. That was the fewest ever. The season ended with the Chicago Bears defeating the Washington Redskins 41-21 in the NFL championship game. It was played the day after Christmas, the first time in NFL history that a playoff game was played so late in the year. Chicago had finished its regular season on November 28th and basically had to wait a whole month for the championship game. So it just goes to show you this would never happen in nowadays. the Chicago Bears waited basically a month. Anybody who was injured got the rest up, right? They're all, every, maybe not totally healed up, but you take a month off and to heal up, you can do a lot of healing at home in a month. And so, but in the meantime, the Redskins had to play a bunch of games. So they came in limping into the championship game. They'd played just a week before. The Bears had played 4 weeks before. Not fair at all. I mean, that's the way it was back then. Let's see. But the Bears had to wait almost a month while the Eastern Division champions were determined because the Redskins and the Giants had to play a playoff game. But I'll go over that in a minute. Washington and the Giants ended the regular season by playing against each other on 2 consecutive Sundays, December 5th and December 12th. The second game originally was scheduled on October 3rd, had been postponed due to must have been some really heavy rain. You cancel a game back then, I mean, it had to be some heavy rain. The Giants won both games to force a playoff. The Redskins won the playoff game to force to play the rights to play the Bears in the championship game. Despite the war, though, the league's popularity continued to grow. The league drew a cumulative attendance of over 1 million people, which was fewer than 7,000 short of the record set the previous year. But despite the fact that there were 15 fewer games played, so if they played as many games as they did the year before, they would have blew the record, the attendance record out of the water. The increased attendance was attributed to the higher competitiveness of the weaker squads. It says the draft was held on April 8th, 1943 in Chicago. Major rule changes. The free substitution rule was adopted. The rule was enacted in response to the depleted rosters of World War II, period, but it profoundly changed the game. Previously, a player could enter the game a single time in each of the first 3 quarters. In the fourth quarter, 2 players on each squad could each be substituted twice. Because of these restrictions, players went both ways, offense and defense. This rule change eventually led to the teams having separate offensive and defensive units. And also another rule change was the wearing of helmets becomes mandatory for all players. We have the division races. The NFL played a shortened schedule of only 10 games. Of the year before, I believe it was 11. In the Eastern Division, the Philadelphia-Pittsburgh team won its first 2 games and led at Week 4 with the 1-0 Redskins were close behind. While in the Western Division, the Bears and Packers tied 21-21 in their first game and were 2-0-1 after 4 weeks. Week 5, the division leaders played each other on October 17th, with the Bears beating the Steagles 48-21 and the Redskins defeating the Packers 33-7, leaving the 2 winners in first place. The Redskins were 5-0-1. The Bears were 7-0-1. Were still unbeaten going to Week 11 and met in Washington. The Redskins won 21-7. So the Redskins were still undefeated, but yet the New York Giants caught them and forced the playoff. The Redskins had their first loss in Week 12 when they lost to the Steagles 27-14 on November 28th. The Bears clinched the Western Division the same day. So basically, the Bears clinched the record the same day, and were 8-1-1 on November 28th. Almost 30 days later, or 28 days later, they played it. So they had like 28 days off before they had to play the championship game. The Bears, not so much for the Redskins. As we check out, I mean, the Redskins, right? After November 28th, the Redskins after November 28th played on December 5th, December 12th, and December 19th just to get to the championship game. So the Redskins had to play 3 games after the Bears ended their season. They played every week up till the championship game, and then they had to play the championship game. The Bears had a whole month off to rest up. You can say maybe they get a little rusty too, but I mean, you practice. You're not playing a game. So they got good chance to rest up. So it was not fair at all, but it's the way it was back then. But after November 21st, the Washington Redskins beat the Chicago Bears 21-7. So with 3 games to go. The Redskins were 6-0-1 with 3 games to go. And the Giants did not start off well at all. First game of the season, they played on the road. Now, they usually played the first couple games on the road. Anywhere from the first 2 to 4 games were on the road because they shared the Polo Grounds with the New York baseball Giants. And it just seemed like they want to make sure that the baseball season and World Series was over with before the New York football Giants took over the stadium and I guess started chewing up the turf. So the Giants usually anywhere from the first 2 to 4 games were on the road, and it was no difference this year. 1943, the Giants' first 2 games were on the road. The Giants didn't play their first home game until October 24th. So the first game of the year, the Giants were on the road. They played the Steagles. They lost 28-14 to start off 0-1. The following week, they were on the road. They played the Brooklyn Dodgers. They won 20-0. So after 2 games, the Giants were 1-1. Then the following week, the Giants played their third game was at home against the Steagles at the Polo Ground. They won 42-14. And so they were 2-1. The following week, the Green Bay Packers came to town. The Packers won 35-21. And so the Giants were 2-2. Not looking too good. Then the Giants' fifth game, the Giants went on the road to play in Detroit on November 7th. The Giants tied 0-0. Giants had a grand total of 3 first downs in the game. Wow. So after 5 games, the Giants were 2-1. And it got even worse. The Giants gave up 56 points to the Bears the following weeks. They lost at home to the Bears 56-7. And so the Giants, after 6 games, were 2-3-1. Not looking good. Not looking good at all. Matter of fact, the Bears had 682 yards of offense in that game. Almost 700 yards of offense. Well, the Giants roster was depleted. And Sid Luckman, the Hall of Fame quarterback of the Chicago Bears, threw 7 touchdown passes in that game. 7. All right. But as I said, he's going up against a depleted roster for the Giants. Sid Luckman had almost 500 yards of passing in that game. Simply amazing. So after the following week on November 21st, November 14th, let's see here. November 14th, the Giants were 2-3-1. November 14th, the Redskins were 5-0-1. The following week on November 21st, the Redskins wanted to go 6-0. 6-0, November 21st. It was 6-0. The Giants won on November 21st. The Chicago Cardinals came to town. The Giants won 24-13. So with 3 games to go in the season, the Giants were 3 games back. They were 3-3-1. The Washington Redskins were 6-0-1. The only way the Giants could make the playoffs, make the championship game, they had to win the final 3 games, and Washington had to lose their final 3 games. And I also remember, not only the Redskins have to lose their final 3 games, they hadn't even lost a game yet in their first 7. But that's why you play the games, right? So on November 28th, the Brooklyn Dodgers came to town. The Giants won 24-7. They beat the Brooklyn Dodgers 24-7 at home. So the Giants are 4-3. The same day, November 28th, the Steagles beat the Redskins 27-14. So now the Redskins have 1 loss. Now the Redskins are 6-1-1. The Giants are 4-3-1. Giants are only 2 games back. Now, what happened was the following week, Washington played the Giants in the Polo Grounds. Now, that would have been the final game of the season had not the game on October 3rd been canceled due to heavy rain. So basically, Washington came to the Polo Grounds to face the Giants. The Giants on December 5th. The Giants won 14-10. So now the Giants are 5-3-1. The Redskins are 6-2-1. So now they got 1 more game left. Giants versus the Redskins. They're making up the game from October, whatever it was, 3rd. That was supposed to be played in Washington, but got canceled due to heavy rain. The Giants went to Washington and won 31-7. So now after the season was over, after all 10 games, the Redskins were 6-3-1. The Giants were 6-3-1. They were tied. So in order to figure out who was going to go to the championship game, they came up with, they had a playoff. See, like nowadays, that wouldn't happen because if it came down, because maybe you might have like a head-to-head, right? The Giants head-to-head won both games. Giants would be the winner, but that's not the way it was back then. Basically, the two teams' records were tied, so they had to have a playoff game to see who went to the championship game. Unfortunately for the Giants, the championship game, the playoff game was played at the Polo Grounds. It was on December 19th. Yeah, Washington came to the Polo Grounds. The Giants were the home team. The Giants won the last two games against the Redskins. Things were looking good, but it was not meant to be. The Redskins won 28-0. I believe they scored 2 touchdowns in the second quarter, 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. Game is over. So the Redskins finished the season at 7-3-1 in first place. The Giants were in second place at 6-4-1. So the Redskins went to the championship game to play the Chicago Bears. What's up today? 0-0 ties. Yeah, I know. You got him back then. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, the Giants, they had their chances. The Giants, their defense, they put up some points. Their defense was not really good. They gave up 170 points, which was not very Giant-like. Once again, I mean, the rosters were kind of depleted due to some players going over to World War II. Yeah, I mean, the Giants scored almost 20 points a game and 19.7 points per game, but they gave up 170. And that's a bit much. I mean, especially for a 10-game season. They still had, still had some major play. I mean, Ward Cuff. The Giants had Mel Hine, Tuffy Lemons. I mean, the Giants still had some good players. Bill Paschal, but let's see, the Giants. What did they have here? Giants gave up 16 touchdown passes. They intercepted 18. They only threw 8 touchdown passes. They only threw 9 interceptions. The Giants only completed 63 passes all year. The Giants defense gave up 119 completions. I mean, the Giants pass defense was not very good at all. The Giants pass defense gave up like 1,000 more yards than the Giants passing offense got. Giants only passed for 760 yards all year. The passing defense gave up 1,724 yards passing. Not very good. Not very impressive. However, on the other side, the Giants were fairly good in the run game. They ran for over 1,400 yards. They averaged 3.7 yards a carry. Their defense only gave up 2.7 yards a carry. So their run defense was fairly good. Just their passing defense was not good at all. Giving up a lot of points. Let's see here. What do you got here? Kick in. The Giants only kicked 3 field goals all year. However, they only gave up 1 field goal all year. 1 field goal. They kicked 26 out of their 27 extra points, which obviously is very, very good. But their defense, their offense was scoring some points. Their defense needed to get better. And 1944, their defense would get better. 1944, was a very, very good year for the. Very, very good year for the New York Giants. They didn't win a championship, but they got there anyway. But so now what we have is 1943, December 26, 1943. We got the championship game, the Redskins and the Bears. Now, 43. Now, don't forget the Western Division hosted the championship games in the odd number years. So 33, 35, 37, 39. So 1943 was the Western Division. So the Bears hosted the championship game 1943. So it was at Wrigley Field. So once again, the Eastern Division hosted the even number years, 34, 6, 38, 40. So next year, 1944, the Giants would go to the championship game. They would host it. That would be in the Polo Grounds, right? But anyway, we're in 1943. So the championship game. Now, the Bears were definitely the better team, but it says the 1943 NFL Championship game was the 11th annual title game of the National Football League. Started in 1933, so when 43 rolled around, it was the 11th. Now, the Bears had been to the last, including this one, the last 4 championship games. The Bears won in 1940 and they won in 1941. The Redskins beat them in 1942, 14-6. So that kind of snapped their streak. But the Bears would prevail this day. So the Bears would win it between 40 and 43. The Bears went to every championship game. The Bears won 3 out of 4. The Bears were a very good team in the early 40s. A very, very good team. The 43 championship game was held at Wrigley Field in Chicago on December 26th with an attendance of 34,000. It was in a rematch of the previous year's championship game. The Western Division Bears met the Washington Redskins. The Redskins won in 1942, 14-6. It said the Redskins defeated the Giants at the Polo Grounds in a playoff game by 28-0 to determine who the champions of the East would be. And I said, I mean, it would show you it just was so unfair. The Bears waited a whole month while the Redskins played the Giants 3 consecutive weeks. I mean, the 2 best teams in the East played each other 3 consecutive weeks, and then the Redskins finally won, and then they went to the championship game while the Bears rested up. Let's see. Where we at here? Even though the Giants had swept the season series, the rules at the time called for a tiebreaker game. So, I mean, like, as I said, the way it would be nowadays, like head-to-head, the Giants won both games during the regular season against the Redskins. Well, the Giants would be probably the winner. That's not the way it was. The way the rules were back then, if they wound up tied, it was they had to play a playoff game. I said the divisional playoff game pushed the championship game back to its latest date ever, which was on December 26th. And the late December Chicago weather caused the game to be dubbed the Ice Bowl. The Bears were favored by a touchdown and won by 20 points, 41-21. The crowd was smaller than the previous years and well off of the championship game, a record of 48,000 set in 1938, which was at the Polo Grounds. But the gross gate receipts were over $120,000. That set a record. In addition to the gate, radio broadcast rights to the game were sold for $5,000 as well. The Bears were led by quarterback Sid Luckman, while Sammy Baugh was the quarterback for the Redskins. The Redskins were coached by Dutch Bergman. The Chicago win marked the franchise's 3rd championship in 4 seasons. Bears won 73-0 in 1940. They beat the Giants 37-9 in 1941, and then they won 41-21 in 1943. This was their 4th championship since the championship game started. The Bears won the championship game. The Bears won the first overall ever official championship game, 1933. They won 23-21 over the Giants. So the Bears won up to 1943. They won in 33. They won in 40, 41, and 43. So this is the Bears' 4th championship game victory. It was just, I mean, the Bears had 168 yards rushing, 276 yards passing. The Redskins barely had like 227 yards of total offense. I mean, what did they have? I mean, they had like a bunch of interceptions. I think they had 4 interceptions, I believe it was. One of the things, it just goes to show you, I mean, it was 14-7 at halftime, right? 14-7 at halftime. But in the 3rd quarter, the Bears scored 13 points, and they scored another 14 points in the 4th quarter and had 41 points. Just goes to show you how things have changed. I mean, this would never wind up happening. I was when the Giants beat them. Gotta love it. Gotta love them Super Bowl victories. But in the championship game, just to go to show you how different things were back then. I mean, we're complaining about Adoree Jackson returning punts and he got injured. It is what it is. As I said, we also had Odell Beckham Jr. returns a couple punts sometimes. It is what it is. Guys get injured and all that. But I mean, the way it was back then, right? And it was either in the first quarter or early second quarter, but somewhere in the first half. I got to read up more on it to zone in on maybe exactly when it was. But anyway, see the first quarter, early second quarter. The Redskins punted. So who was their punter? Their Hall of Fame quarterback, Sammy Baugh. He punted the ball. Who received the punt for the Chicago Bears? Their Hall of Fame quarterback, Sid Luckman. So you had a Hall of Fame quarterback punting the ball to a Hall of Fame quarterback, right? The Hall of Fame quarterback, Sid Luckman, caught the punt, and he either got a block or, so he maybe juked one or two guys or something like that. But just to go to show you, I mean, how it was back then, he might have got past one or two guys or so, but then he was running with the ball, and who was in front of him? Sammy Baugh, the punter. Punted the ball, ran downfield, to make a tackle. It's not like nowadays where the punter punts the ball and he lays back 85 yards and maybe if the guy breaks free, maybe he'll try to maybe make a dive, make it look good and stuff like that. No, that's not the way it was back then. The Hall of Fame quarterback, Sammy Baugh, punted, ran down the field to make a tackle. Well, Sid Luckman, he said, it was nothing dirty, but he said he had to make a split decision. He got Sammy Baugh in front of him. He's running with the ball. And he's like, he had to make a split decision. Do I try to juke him or do I just try to go forward? Well, he went forward. So however it was, I don't know if Sammy Baugh maybe went down, bent his head down and maybe to make a tackle or something like that. I don't know if Sid Luckman's knee hit him or something, whatever, but I think he knocked Sammy Baugh out, knocked him silly. And I think Sammy Baugh missed some time during the game because he was knocked out silly. Because if you ever look at the stats, there was another quarterback came in and was throwing passes for the Redskins. Now, that wouldn't happen if Sammy Baugh was healthy. So I believe Sammy Baugh came back to his senses sometime in the fourth quarter. And I think he threw a touchdown pass in the fourth quarter. But I mean, he missed time, because he got knocked out by the other quarterback. Right. I mean, it wouldn't ever happen nowadays, but that's the way it was back then. I mean, you only had so many guys. I think the Giants only had 28 guys on their roster for the whole season, in 1943. You got to play both ways. And if you come off the field, that means you're dead, or that means you may not ever get your job back, but you got to go both ways. And that's just the way it was. I mean, the Redskins, and just do the Sammy Baugh, their best player, getting injured. I said, I mean, the Bears finished their season on November 28th. They had a whole month off until the championship game started. The Redskins and the Giants played 3 games against one another after the Bears finished their season. I mean, the Redskins and the Giants played December 5th, the 12th, and the 19th just to see who would go to the championship game while the Bears are sitting at home eating Cheetos and Doritos and drinking beer, watching TV. Trying to... Not really, but, resting up. So by the time the championship game came around, the Bears were not only home, they were rested up for a month. The Redskins had just played 3 games in the course of the last 3 weeks, beating each other up. They came limping into the game. Not only that, but then their star quarterback gets knocked out of the game for a period of time. Just everything was in the Bears' favor. I'm saying just stuff like that wouldn't happen nowadays, but that's the way it was back then. But it was, it was a relatively successful season for the Giants. But you also have to keep in mind too. I mean, like with all the rosters, right? The World War II depleted a lot of the rosters, so you weren't getting necessarily a lot of the best talent. So, I mean, the Giants did some struggling. They made it exciting at the end. They won their final 4 games just to get to be 6-3-1, just to get to a playoff game to see who would go to the championship game. It just wasn't meant to be. But in 1944, well, it was meant to be, but it's not meant. The Giants got to the championship game. They fell a little bit short, but 1944 would be one of those, if you ever have one of those series called like the missing rings or the missing championships for the New York Giants, 1944 would be one of those seasons. The Giants once again, with the championship game against the Packers, the Giants got a little screwed. So it was what it was, but got some good times ahead for the New York Football Giants. Well, that pretty much wraps up the 1943 season, and I'll be back again later on. I'll be back again to do the 1944 season for the New York Giants, which just happened to be the 20th season in the history of the New York Football Giants. I'll see you then.